Hi, good morning. Today, I am going to go ahead and do one of the most important topic from the point of view of exam. Very important topic. And that is going to be stability condition and you can say partial and general equilibrium. This topic is one of the most important topics from the point of view of exam, and I am pretty sure that there will be one question which would be coming from this in your exam, right? So it is very important that you go ahead and you understand this topic very well. Okay. So to begin with, let us go ahead and let us try to understand that when we talk about existence and stability of equilibrium, what do we actually mean by, first of all, general equilibrium, partial equilibrium? What are these concepts? And then let us try to go ahead and understand in a little more detail as to what their conditions can be. How can we go ahead and find the equilibrium conditions in each of these cases, right? One more thing I would like to go ahead and I would like to highlight here is that, there in between, there is going to be some use of a difference equation, है ना? And you may feel that difference equation is somewhat, if you have not done math, somewhat difficult. So I am not going to go ahead and take difference equation in leaps and bounds here. That, of course, is available under your maths video section. But still, I would want you to go ahead and look into difference equation, jitna ho paye, for this topic, right? So just go ahead and do some part of difference equation for this topic. It will be helpful. Okay? Otherwise, maths में तो anyways you will be doing difference equation, but थोड़ा सा अगर difference equation समझ लोगे, it will be useful. ठीक है. Now, first of all, let us try to understand what is the meaning of partial and general. So when we say partial equilibrium, it means that we are going ahead and considering one market at a time. And when we talk about general equilibrium, it means we are considering overall equilibrium. Right? Overall equilibrium can be called as aggregate equilibrium, and it can also be called as wider equilibrium. Whereas when we talk about the concept of partial equilibrium is actually narrow in nature. So it is narrow equilibrium, right? So partial equilibrium is a narrow equilibrium concept. General equilibrium is a wider equilibrium concept. And because the way, so you can see the word itself, the way that they are used, you will understand the difference between the two. For example, let's take an example to understand this thing. So I am going ahead and I am telling you, beta, dekho, the price of tea decreased And this led to increase in quantity demanded of tea. And I am using the word ceteris paribus. Ceteris paribus means holding other things constant, right? I am holding income of consumer constant, taste and preferences constant, holding all other things constant. सबको constant रखते हुए, when there was an decrease in price of tea, the demand of tea increased. So we can say that this is the cause and this is the effect. If we go and understand, if we try to understand only this much, अगर हम सिर्फ इतना ही पढ़ते हैं, what is cause and what is effect, this much is the concept of partial equilibrium. If I just go ahead and analyze this thing, है ना? This becomes my partial equilibrium concept. Now, let's talk about the general equilibrium concept. So suppose now what I go ahead and what I do is, I start analyzing one step further. So I start understanding, okay, what will happen further in other markets? So you tell me that, look, ma'am, price of tea has decreased. Demand of tea has increased, right? This means that the coffee market will be affected and demand of coffee will decrease, right? Now, ma'am, if demand of coffee will decrease, so, the suppliers will understand that nobody is demanding coffee. So the quantity sold of coffee will decrease, right? So the tea market is affecting the coffee market. Because this is called as the spillover effect. This becomes the spillover effect. Now, suppose we analyze this further, that okay, the quantity demanded or the quantity of coffee decreased and therefore the quantity sold in the market of coffee decreased. Ab kya hoga? Now, next year, these coffee producers, they will think, अरे, we already have stock of coffee with us. हमारे पास तो पहले की ही coffee काफी बची हुई है, right? So what they will be doing is that they will be producing less coffee next year. When they will be producing less coffee, they would require less raw material for it. So they will be using less raw material. When they will be using less raw material for it, इससे क्या होगा बेटा? Raw material कम use होगा. Raw material में ही एक raw material is labor. So they will be using less labor. Now, when you will use less labor, it means you will fire labor from the market. And when you will fire labor, what will happen, beta? Wage of labor will decrease. When the income of labor will fall, labor will demand less things. Demand from labor will fall. So labor will be demanding multiple things, जैसे TV, fridge. But among these multiple things, there will be one thing which will be tea. So this labor will be demanding less tea also. Clear? तो अब क्या हुआ कि when price of tea decreased, ultimately through multiple steps, ding, 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 ultimately the demand of tea also lowered. This effect, if it hits the tea market itself, This becomes my feedback effect. This is called as the feedback effect. So there are two effects that have taken place. दो effect हो गए एक साथ. One is the spillover effect and other is called the feedback effect, right? When we analyze it in this way, when we try to analyze the tea market, coffee market, labor market simultaneously, that is called as general equilibrium concept. So general equilibrium concept is going ahead and it is taking all factors into consideration. So general equilibrium concept, right? This was actually given by Leon Walrus, also called as Walrasian concept, right? It was given by him in his book called Elements of Pure Economy. उन्होंने एक बुक लिखी थी Elements of Pure Economy, उसी में इसके बारे में बात की थी. And he said that we want all markets to be simultaneously in equilibrium. We want all markets to be simultaneously in equilibrium. ठीक है. Now, इधर इन्होंने एक point किया था which we will be talking about in general equilibrium chapter, but he actually went ahead and he said something very important which we can just write down here itself, that if there are n markets and n minus 1 markets clear, then the nth market will also clear. And this came to be known as his law, right? तो उन्होंने बोला कि देखो अगर n मार्केट्स हैं और इनमें से n माइनस 1 मार्केट क्लियर कर रही हैं, if n minus 1 markets are clearing, then the nth market will also clear itself. And this came to be known as the Walrus Law. इसी को हमने Walrus Law बोल दिया, right? Now what we can go ahead and we can do is, let us try to go ahead and take two cases where market equilibrium doesn't exist. Right, beta? First case. This is when you have zero production case. So the first case where market equilibrium does not exist, right? It is the case of zero production. Zero production कैसे show कर सकते हैं? Just try to see here. So for example, let's say that my demand curve looks something like this. And supply curve looks something like this. I have taken price here and quantity here. So you can identify that my equilibrium, it will lie somewhere here, beta, with negative quantity. But negative quantity does not mean anything in the economic sense. There is no meaning of negative quantity, right? So ideally, because there is no intersection between the demand and supply curve, ये दोनों कहीं intersect कर ही नहीं रहे हैं, right? the intersection is taking place with negative quantity. So we can say that there is no positive quantity where equilibrium is possible. ऐसी कोई पॉजिटिव क्वांटिटी नहीं है. There is no positive quantity such that your equilibrium is possible. Similarly, case 2, pretty good case. Right? So let us go ahead and say that this is my supply curve and this is my demand curve. Let me make demand curve a bit here. So if I look at the supply and demand curve, what do I realize? I realize that their intersection either will be at the x-axis, that means price is 0, or it may be below the x-axis, right? This is the case of good being a free good, like air, right? So whenever the good is a free good, the supply will always exceed the demand, right? You see the intersection is literally not there, right? So which means that again, we are considering the case where there will be no market equilibrium, right? So again, in this case, I pick up any price, any positive price, I will notice that supply will always exceed them, right? So add any positive price, supply always exceeds demand. So these are two extreme cases where equilibrium is not possible, where either the good available is free of cost, the supply is always more than demand, or there is zero production in the economy. Zero production का example क्या हो सकता है? Such goods for which if you produce them, the demand will be too low, right? So for example, if tomorrow I launch a gold tiffin box, then maybe the minimum supply that I give in the market is more than what the demand is. Maybe uska demand hai hi nahi, right? So when the demand is too low at the price at which I launch the product in the market, I would rather not launch it in the market. Okay. So zero production means that the demand is so low that there is no reason why you will go ahead and you will launch the product in the market. Now, just focus here that when I'm talking about these cases, I am still talking about unique equilibria. But I just want to bring to your notice another additional case, which is the case of multiple equilibrium. So multiple equilibria is when demand and supply curve, they go ahead and they meet more than once. So for example, case A, you have backward bending supply curve. Right? And you have a demand curve. And you notice that there are 2 points at which demand and supply are meeting. So, ये रहा एक point and ये रहा दूसरा point. Right? This is the case of multiple equilibria. There is another thing. So, for example, this is the demand curve and this is my supply curve. In such cases also, there are multiple points at which demand and supply are meeting. So when your demand and supply meets more than once, right? Then you have the case of multiple equilibrium. There are two more cases. So see, suppose you have unique quantity, but multiple prices like this. Supply curve. So when demand and supply meet, they are meeting at unique quantity, but there are multiple prices associated with them, right? Multiple prices. And last case. Something like this. Demand and supply. There are multiple quantities associated with them with a single price. So there can be cases where you can end up having multiple equilibriums. Now the question is that whether I have a unique equilibrium or multiple equilibrium, am I talking about a stable equilibrium or not? So how do I define stability of an equilibrium? What is a stable equilibrium? Stability of equilibrium. Any equilibrium is called a stable equilibrium. ध्यान से सुनना. If following any disturbance, whenever there will be any disturbance, right, that equilibrium will be re-established. For example, let's say ये मेरा demand curve है and supply curve. Initially, I am at point E. There is some disequilibrium in the economy. There is some disturbance in the economy due to which I reach price P dash. The equilibrium E will be called as a stable equilibrium. इसको हम stable कब बोलेंगे? If following this disturbance, I am able to reach back point E. अगर मैं इस point E को वापस reach कर पाऊं, if I reach back point E where I started from, then it will be called as stable equilibrium. I hope this is making sense to you, right? So please write down. The equilibrium is called stable equilibrium if following any disturbance, the equilibrium is re-established, right? So whenever there is any disturbance, कुछ भी disturbance, so you reach a lower price due to some reason, if you are able to go back to the equilibrium, then it will be called as stable equilibrium. And when will it be called unstable? So it will be called unstable if the system tends to move away from the equilibrium situation. So if when I was away from equilibrium, when there was a disturbance in my economy, जब भी कोई भी disturbance हुई, if I could not re-establish that equilibrium, मैं उस equilibrium पे वापस नहीं आ पाई, right? Then it will be unstable in nature. So it will be stable in nature if I am able to re-establish the equilibrium. It will be unstable in nature if I am not able to re-establish the equilibrium. Let's take some examples, beta. Right? Acha, before I take an example, I just want to highlight here that there are two kind of stability equilibrium that we talk about. One is called as static, one is called as dynamic. So whatever stability conditions we are doing as of now, these are static equilibrium. Static. Right? Whatever equilibrium conditions we are doing for now, these are static in nature. And by static, what do I mean, beta? By static, I mean that these equilibrium conditions, they are, whenever we do them, we assume that we are talking about the same time period, single time period. We don't consider time to be changing. In today's lecture only, I will go ahead and take you through dynamic period equilibrium condition also. वो भी पढ़ेंगे कि what is a dynamic period equilibrium condition and how that is established. But अभी के लिए we are starting our class with static equilibrium condition. ठीक है? Okay. So let us go ahead and let us say this is my demand curve. And this is my supply curve. Okay. And suppose this is my initial point E. By equilibrium, I mean that the demand must be equal to supply. So this is the price I have achieved. And this is my quantity, right? If you notice here, you will realize that supply is more than demand. Now, whenever we write the function, we always write the function as the difference between demand and supply, and that is called as my excess demand function. So ED represents demand minus supply. So because here supply is more than demand, we can go ahead and we can say that demand is less than supply. So my excess demand is negative. So in this region, I can say that my excess demand is negative. Similarly, if you notice here, you will realize your demand is more and supply is less. So in this region, your demand is more than supply. And if your demand is more than supply, so we can say that your excess demand is positive. We always go ahead and give excess, we give this in terms of excess demand and excess supply. Excess demand always, right? Acha, now, so try to understand now. Suppose I go ahead and I tell you that I am at disequilibrium and say I am at price P1. So at price P1, we know that supply is more than demand. So we know that when supply is more, demand is less, that means market में बहुत ज़्यादा product छोड़ दिया गया है, right? You have excessive good in the market. People are not purchasing that good. So when people will not purchase the good, right? And suppliers want to sell their commodity, right? They have their commodity, right? I have 100 kgs of potatoes with me. People are only demanding 40 kgs of potatoes. I want to sell the remaining 60 kgs of potato in the market. So whenever I want to sell them in the market, what will I do? I don't want them to be wasted. Okay, I will reduce the price. I will say, ठीक है, कम पैसों में ले लो, but ले लो. So I will try to lower the price in the market. So whenever supply will be more than demand, right? As a natural thing, the supplier will want to go ahead and would want to lower the price of the product from the market. So this is what we are doing here, that okay, if supply is more than demand, you will lower the price of the product that exists in the market. And as you will go ahead and you will lower the price of the product, it means that at lower price, demand, law of demand suggests demand will increase. At lower price, law of supply suggests supply will decrease. So the difference between demand and supply, it will fall, right? So see here, we are reducing the supply because price has fallen, increasing the demand, moving along the demand curve, and this gap will fall. Similarly, now also supply is more than demand. So producer will go ahead and lower the price further. So when price will lower further to P double dash, now supply will be this much and demand will be this much. And this will continue. ये continue होता ही रहेगा till you go ahead and you reach this equilibrium. So when you are at disequilibrium, you are able to attain equilibrium. That means that this is a stability diagram. This diagram is absolutely correct. This is showing us the correct thing. We are stable in nature.